Good afternoon. Today we'll start a discussion regarding the fundamentals of business analysis. And me, myself, Shantanu Chakraborty from Department of Data Science, Techno India University. So basically, we'll be looking into the business analysis fundamentals and how it is important. So definition of business analysis and business analyst profession as a whole, exploring the knowledge area of business analysis, definition of requirement and their types, and also understanding the difference between the requirement elicitation and requirement gathering. So these are few of the objectives that we'll be discussing. Now, what is business analysis is all about? A business analysis is a practice of enabling a change on the basis of organizational context. So, how does it helps to enable change? By defining the needs, recommending the solution, the deliverables that has to be met by the stakeholders, the task and techniques that are used to perform business analysis, which are defined in a guide to the business analysis body of knowledge. So all these is basically very, very important prerequisite what is business analysis is all about. Then we look into the titles, basically the practitioner's approach, the analyst, the system analyst, the requirement engineer, the process analyst, the product manager, the product owner, the enterprise analyst, the business architect, the management consultant, the business intelligence, the analyst, the data scientist, and other jobs related to management, project management, product management, software development, quality assurance, and interaction design, which heavily relies on the business analysis skill set for their success. So this is all about what a business analyst is supposed to deliver, right? Then we look into how a business analysis helps the business to do better. So a business analyst is an agent of change. He provides a very disciplined approach by introducing and managing the change related to organizational context. So a business analysis is used to identify and articulate the need to change in the organizational work and to facilitate that change. So he is basically the one who identify and articulate the change, and he identifies and defines what type of solutions that will be required, which can maximize the deliverables by an organization to its stakeholder. So business analysts work across all level of an organization, and he is involved in everything from defining a strategy to creating an enterprise architecture and to taking a leadership role by defining the goals and requirement for a particular program. And he provides a support to all the project staff, and he basically is involved in providing continuous improvement in the technology and the process in case of any project undertaken by an organization. So these are some of the very important key factors. Now, what was the scenario in the beginning when there was no business analyst in an organization? It was a scenario of total chaos. Why? Because the projects were like battlefield and nothing was planned, nothing was organized properly. Sometimes the deliverables are also not met on time, and the customer requirements were also not documented properly. So there's a lot of work which was being done, but it was not at all productive. So business analyst is a person who has made this work very productive to all the stakeholders. So whatever the work that was being done is being productive, and it counts to the growth of an organization as a whole. So as an analyst, the organization invested in project management practices, and a typical project management practices involves planning, planning the project, building, testing, and implementing. So there is a well-phased plan that we start from an organizational point of view. We try to plan, build, test, and implement. So we try to plan the plan the deliverables. Then we look into how we can build and test and we can implement and whether it works for an organizational context or not. So why it doesn't work? Because 16.2% of the projects will be completed on time and on budget. But 40 to 50, 60% of the projects, they do not complete on time. There are certain errors in the projects that needs to be fixed, and there has to be some work that has to be done. So the average project cost, it exceeds is planned time schedule, and the project costs are accelerated basically, and about 30% of projects are cancelled before completion. So this is a scenario which doesn't work because there is some cost which is involved, there is a manpower which is involved, there are a lot of extra labor which is involved, which is not at all productive, and it requires fixing those errors, and project has to be reworked, and as the project cost exceeds its planned and time schedule, so there are delays in the deliverables to be met. So this is what it doesn't work. So to make it work, a typical business analyst is needed for proper coordination, and whatever the effort on requirement analysis and the errors has to be minimized and has to be fixed at the budding level. Now, why the projects are doomed? Why do these particular projects, which are undertaken by bigger organization, does not lead towards its completion? Because there lies so many flaws. So here lies a big job of a business analyst who needs to go ahead and bridge this gap between the deliverables of the project to the organization on time and the deliverables are met. So now the complete picture is that you describe, define, plan, build, test, and implement. So business analysis and project management provides what the customer wants. Customer wants proper deliverables, and it needs the proper requirement of the customer should be properly documented. So whatever the deliverables that are made to the customer are done on time, and customer get what exactly he wants from a given project. So this is very, very important part of your business analysis, which integrates with project management, because here planning, building, testing, and implementation is involved. Now, why does this word mean anyway? That is the system analyst, the system architect, the business system analyst, the business analyst, and analyst programmer. So, what are the deliverables? What are the objective of these people in project management? What has changed? As per IIBA, that is the International Institute of Business Analysis, which is established in 2003, it acts as an independent non-profit association serving in the growing field of business analysis. So IIBA initiative, it has been established that there are certain tasks that needs to be taken among the stakeholder. So we need to understand what is the structure, policies, and operations of an organization. And we need to recommend a solution that enables the organization to achieve its standard, goals, and objective. So IIDA defines business analysis, which will help us to understand the organizational structure, the organizational policies, and it will help us to recommend a solution that enables the organization to achieve its various goals. So what does a business analyst does? A business analyst work as a liaison among the stakeholder in order to do various types of activities and tasks. The first and the very important task of a business analyst is elicitation. He will try to elicit and find the requirement of the user. Then he'll try to analyze those requirements and communicate and validate those requirements for changes to the business processes. He'll also frame various policies and share information with regard to the system. So a business analyst has got a very, very important job to play in an organization, as he's there to bridge the gap between the customer, validation, and he's involved in most of the business processes. Now here you can see in this diagram the business analyst interacting or he acting as a bridge between the project manager, solution developer, subject matter expert, and the owner or the sponsor of a company. So the CEO, project manager, developer, and the subject matter experts, he acts as a bridge between these stakeholders and playing a very, very important role. Now, how and in what way the SRS or the system requirement specifications are being stated or explicitly being documented and are being put into action. So SRS is the one part where we try to understand how the customer has explained its requirements. What are the customer requirement? What are the various requirement of a customer? How the project leader understood this requirement? How the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it, how the business consultant described it. So all these are the one which are the requirement that is being stated. So how the customer has explained the requirement, which is a very, very important part of the system requirement specification or SRS. If the requirement are not properly understood or if they are not properly specified, then it becomes very difficult for a project leader to understand those requirements and then to work on those requirements. Then similarly is the scenario for the analyst who tries to design the system and the programmer who tries to write a particular code based on this requirement, and how the business consultant will be describing their requirement, how the project was documented, what operations were installed in the project, how the customer was built, how it was supported, and what the customer really needed. So all these are part of your SRS or system requirement specification, which frame an integral part of business analysis. How customer is explaining, how the project leader is understanding, how the analyst is designing the system, how the programmer is writing the code, how the consultant is describing it, how the project manager was documented, how the customer was built, what operations were installed, how it was supported, and what the customer really expected and needed out of that project. So all these comes as a very important part of your SRS or the system requirement specification. The requirement is as per the IIBA. IIBA is International Institute of Business Analysis. Basically, the requirement has to be defined based on certain criteria. Number one, conditional or the capability that is needed by a stakeholder to solve a problem so that he can achieve a well-defined objective. Condition or capability that must be met by a system to satisfy a contract. A standard specification that has to be formally documented, and a documented representation of the conditions and their capabilities that should be provided. So these are the requirement of IIBA, where a condition or a capability needed by a stakeholder that can help in solving a problem and achieving a well-defined objective. Now we come down to types of requirement. So there are three very important type of requirement, which is a part of your business analysis. One is a business requirement. The second one is the user requirement. And the third one is the system requirement. The business requirement, it requires a higher level statement of the goals and objectives that has to be met by the system. So what is a higher level of goal and objective that is needed by a system, which comes as a part, an imperative part of your business requirement. After the business requirement, the next is basically the user requirement. The user requirement states the statement of the need of a particular stakeholder or a class, and the requirement of the system describes the behavior and the information that the solution will manage. So these are three various types of requirement that we can see as a part of business analysis, right? Then the four C's. The four C's are very important because the requirement should be complete. The requirement of the customer should be very clear, correct, and consistent. So if the requirement are not complete, clear, correct, or consistent, then it can lead to ambiguity or it can lead to confusion. So the four C's have to be followed very precisely, how the requirements should be stated, how the requirement should be very clear, what should be the requirement that is very consistent, that has to be properly and documented in a well-defined form. So these are called as the 4 C's of the requirement, that should be complete, clear, correct, and consistent. Then comes the business analysis knowledge areas. So business analysis knowledge areas deals with business analysis, planning and monitoring. So basically what we do here is that we try to do the business analysis, planning and monitoring, which starts with enterprise analysis. Then it goes to elicitation, followed by requirement analysis, and then for solution assessment and validation. So this is how we try to manage the requirement and communicate what are the requirement to all the stakeholders. So where your business analysis, planning and monitoring activity starts officially. Now, in enterprise analysis, what we see there is a feasibility study that is taking place at the starting of the system. And because of the feasibility study, high level risk can be properly assessed, where we try to access the technical feasibility, the operational feasibility, and the cost benefit analysis. And it differs from one business cases to another. Now, when we come down to requirement planning and management, we should be very clear what methodology that will be used on a project, means how the requirements should be collected or it can be elicited from the customer point of view. So in this way or in this category, the requirement specification playing a very, very important role in business analysis and monitoring. Now, when we do with the requirement elicitation, so it has to be a part of your core business analysis activity where the requirements are elicited, they are gathered, and we get all the real requirement from the stakeholder. We also find out what is elicitation and we define how the elicitation can be performed. And for requirement elicitation, how we gather this requirement is basically through a interview, survey, focus group interview, through observation and prototyping. So these are the various methods by which we go for requirement elicitation. So requirement elicitation can be taken into consideration if we go about how we elicitate this requirement, what type of interview techniques that we are using, what type of surveys that we are using, meeting and the focus group interview, the observation and the prototyping model help us to create or help us to get the requirement. So where can we go to elicitate the requirement? So how do we know what is the requirement of a user, manager, executive, programmers, subject matter experts, and the web consultant or the system administrator? So how we can go about to gather the requirements? So requirement elicitation can be done through use of various documentation tools. So what are these documentation tools that we use for requirement elicitation? The documentation tool that we use for requirement elicitation is ER diagram, process flow diagram, use case diagram. So these are the various documentation tools that we use as a part of SRS, that is for the system requirement specification. And these particular tools help us to identify the requirement, communicate the requirement back to the stakeholder, review those requirement as per the requirement that is being specified. So this is basically the requirement. Communication is also very, very important. Then we come down to the next part, that is our solution assessment and validation. So how do we evaluate and select a solution, and how do we test it? How do we implement it? And after the implementation, how do we review it? So basically, how to evaluate and select a solution to a problem, how to validate it, how to test it, and how to implement it, becoming a very imperative part of our requirement specification. Now we come down to the next very important part of business analysis, that is business analysis core concept model. So business analysis core concept model is basically a conceptual framework. What is this business analysis core concept model? This is basically a conceptual framework for business analysis, which is outlined in the business analysis body of knowledge, which is also called as BABOK. So business analysis body of knowledge provides us a particular guidebook, a conceptual framework for business analysis, and basically it guides or it defines the business analysis problem which enable changes in an enterprise by defining their needs, recommending a solution, and what deliverables that has to be met, which has to be valued by the stakeholder. So business analysis encompasses a wide range of skill. It encompasses a wide range of skill, knowledge, and tasks that may vary in various form. That is from one individual to another. And business analyst is the one who will provide the various initiative within an organization. So this is basically all about your business analysis core concept model. So in business analysis core concept model, we see there is a conceptual framework that is provided by the business analyst. Basically, they can perform and they can discuss some terminology which is very independent of the industry methodology or the level of organization. So there are 6 very important concepts of business analysis core concept model. So basically the 6 concepts are change, need, solution, stakeholder, value, and context. So we'll see each of these concepts as a part of our business analysis core concept model. Each concept is defined by and dependent on the other 5 concepts and cannot be fully understood in isolation. So these are the 6 very, very important part and concepts in case of business analysis core concept. As a part of business analysis core concept model, we can see change. The change is an act of transformation within an organization and in response to a need. So need can be internal. Need can be something that should be initiated or necessitated by an external event or a disruption in the market. So change is an act of transformation, which is a very important parameter of business analysis core concept model. And it basically aims, the change is to improve the performance of an enterprise. Second, very important is the need. So need is a problem or opportunity that needs to be addressed by the business analyst. Basically, what is the need of a problem or an opportunity which has to be properly addressed by the business analyst. Basically, the need can cause changes by motivating the stakeholder to act. And the solution is basically a specific way of satisfying one or more needs in a context. So we can satisfy one or more needs in a context. That is the second part of the business analysis core concept model. Next is the stakeholder. Who is the stakeholder? A stakeholder is a group of individuals with a relationship to the change. The need or the solution, the stakeholder are grouped based on their relationship to the change need for a specific solution. So that is basically the stakeholder. Then we have the value. The value is the importance or usefulness of something to a stakeholder within an organizational context. So what is the importance or usefulness to the stakeholder within an organizational context? That is the value. So value can be of 2 types. A value can be a tangible value or it can be intangible values. The values that cannot be measured are intangible. The values that can be measured, for example, returns, gain, which are tangible. And intangible values, motivation, component, such as company's reputation and employee morale, these are all intangible values. Then we come down to context. The context is basically the circumstances that influence by or which provides a very clear-cut understanding of a change. So when we talk about the context, it provides a very important and understanding of a change that can always occur within an organizational environment or within an organizational context that can include everything from organizational culture, mission, vision, demographics to government policies. It also involves the competitors, the product and sales, and the other departments. So basically, successfully implementing the change, the analyst must carefully define and analyze the context within which this change is implemented. So if a change is implemented, then that change is influenced by some activity or event, some environment within or outside the organization. So that is basically is called as the context. So context, value, change, need, and the stakeholder, very, very important component of business analysis core concept model. So basically, then we come down to the business analysis core concept model. Who are the stakeholder? The stakeholder is basically the people who can be affected by the organizational action. It can be anyone who can be directly or who can be indirectly affected by those actions. So that is called as the stakeholder. Next is the requirement. The requirement are the one which are representation of the objective and the deliverables that should be met or should be provided. It can be a condition, it can be a need by the stakeholder who can satisfy a specific objective. So this is basically called as requirement. Then we have the certified business analyst professional. So this is basically a certification or the certified professional who sit for an exam and get himself certified, followed by the scope of the work. The scope of the work basically is about the information and the parameters which are associated. So there are various information and parameters which are associated, which gives us the scope of the work. Use cases. Use cases is basically the description of the position, the title, who holds that role, the interaction that role has with the system, and the change management unit. It's basically a systematic approach to assist an organization or an individual or a team to adapt to the changes within the business environment. So, how the team members or the individual within the organization can adapt to the changes in the business environment by implementing the procedures and utilizing the technology, the necessary technology for optimum utilization of resources. That is also a very important concept under your business analysis core concept model. Then the change management, elicitation, validation, business case, and solution scope. So change management is basically there is to assist an organization or an individual team to adapt to the changes within their business environment by implementing proper procedure and utilizing the necessary technology. Very important, necessary technology, the individuals and the environment by which we can implement these procedures playing a very important and strategic role. And then we come down to the steps that is used to extract information or the requirement from a stakeholder. Then the validation, that is selecting the best solution that fits the stakeholder needs and determine if the solution meets the requirement, and business cases, which is a well-structured document that demonstrate the reason for initiating a project. And finally, last but not least, is the requirement solution that must support to all the business requirement and the need. This is a small diagram that shows the requirement is business analysis and the management of the cycle. So requirement will follow. Then you have planning and monitoring. Then you have the requirement life cycle management, strategy analysis, requirement analysis and design definition, and the collaboration and the elicitation and collaboration also playing a very, very important role in requirement analysis and management. So why is requirement necessary? Basically, the business analysis, or as per the business analysis book of knowledge, a standard guideline that needs to be mentioned for IIBA, that is International Institute of Business Management, and it has got 6 areas of knowledge. Two of these concerned with requirement analysis, design definition, as well as requirement life cycle. So well-formulated requirements that are regularly communicated with the stakeholder are essential to provide the desired product. So basically, what is requirement? What is requirement cycle? What are the prerequisites required for a requirement? How this requirement should be specified and how this requirement should be met, properly defined in the business analysis book of knowledge, which is certified by International Institute of Business Analysts. Then we come down to why it's not a requirement. Requirement is not an organizational goal. For example, your organization mission and goal cannot be a requirement. A organization mission and vision and goal cannot be a requirement. Requirement is not a project boundary. The requirement cannot be a boundary to a project. For example, the deliverables to be met, the project deadline is to be met cannot be a requirement. The requirement cannot be a language. A requirement are, for example, for adding item to their shopping cart. User should be able to view the item in the shopping cart and every time. These are some of the example of a requirement. So we specify the requirement and we model these requirement as per our organizational needs and requirement. So for modeling the requirement and specifying the requirement, we use different tools. So what are the tools that we use for modeling and specifying the requirement? The tools that we are using, the first one is the use case diagram. So the use case diagram is one of the very important and effective tools that we use for this requirement to be specified properly and documented properly. So we had some very different idea altogether in the mind where the requirement in your software are misunderstood. Precisely need to be communicated. So if the requirement is not understood and it is not properly communicated and not properly mentioned by the customer, so it becomes very uncomfortable to design a system based on those wrong requirements. So that is why the use case diagram acts as a tool so that we know that the requirements are properly communicated by the customer and properly documented and implemented by the design. So a proper graphical visualization of a behavior of the system from a view of the stakeholder is created, which is defined through UML. UML is called as Unified Modeling Language. So UML, they offer great support when finding and defining this requirement. So use case diagram, what is being described, who is using the system, what are the actors that they are using in a use case diagram, playing a very, very important and vital role. So use case diagram is a diagram behavior that visualize the observable interaction between the actor and the system under development. So diagram consists of the system, the use case, actors, and it relates to these entities. So this is a small example of a use case diagram that we can see. Here we can see a hungry customer who registered as a customer as he orders to us online for a food through online food app. And once he pays online and he pays or with a credit card or a debit card, so he makes a order placed. And once the order is confirmed, the order is processed, the email system receives an email, the order is processed and then it is delivered and then the billing information or the payment is done for a given order. So this is how a use case diagram is giving a visual representation. The use case diagram is providing us a visual representation, how a customer registers for an order, how he pays online, how he orders the food, what type of order confirmation that he provides, what type of deliverables are met at each stage, and how it is communicated to all the stakeholders that has been taken into consideration. So all these things playing a very, very important and vital role when we define or when we discuss a use case diagram. So what isn't in a use case diagram? The use case diagram does not describe the order in which the use case are carried out. So basically, it defines the use case, but the process is carried out in many steps like insert a card. Basically, the use case diagram does not provide us the detailed specification. It gives a visual representation and how basically that can be implemented, who are the actors, how they can collaborate, who are the stakeholder who can work together. Then comes an activity diagram. So other diagram recommended after the use case diagram is an activity diagram. Now, what is BA-BOK? BA-BOK is Business Analysis Book of Knowledge, as we have discussed earlier. So what is BA-BOK? BA-BOK is basically a business analysis book of knowledge, which is being followed by all the practitioners in various domains. So it is a practice of enabling the change in the context of enterprise or in context of organization. It is specifically using a set of tools and techniques to uncover and analyze the needs or potential opportunities in order to drive business value. So basically, it tries to find out the tools and techniques that is used to uncover and analyze the need for potential opportunities that lies within the business. That is as per BABOK, that is called as Business Analysis Book of Knowledge. Now, as per the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge, the requirement analysis and design, very, very important is that we try to go ahead and define the task, specify the model requirement, verify this requirement, validate this requirement, define the requirement architecture, design various options, and analyze their potential benefit and recommend a recommended solution. So this is basically the requirement analysis and design for BABOK, Business Analysis Book of Knowledge. And we can trace requirement or the reality of the traceability by customer stakeholder analysis, or we can use the need, business requirement, stakeholder requirement, and the solution requirement to trace the requirement or trace the reality of the requirement. Then we maintain, prioritize, and approve these requirements. So whatever the requirement that we have collected, we need to have maintain this requirement, prioritize which requirement needs more attention and why and how, and then we approve this requirement as per the criteria or as per the schedule one by one. So we prioritize, we evaluate, and we approve these requirements as per various criteria that is provided. So we have to record all the collected information as required, and we can verify these requirements. And only once we have verified this requirement, we can sign off by all the participants, take their review, and able to ensure the traceability of this requirement to the stakeholder and their needs and their requirements are met properly. So we maintain, we prioritize, we apply, and we approve the requirement. So these are the activities that we do with a requirement in connection with use case diagram. So this is a requirement in business analysis where we have the business analysis planning and monitoring. We have elicitation and collaboration. We have requirement lifecycle management. We have the solution evaluation, strategy analysis, and requirement analysis. This is all about the basic fundamental of BABOK. I hope you understand today's session and you understand what is business analysis, what is the role of business analyst in an organization, what is business analysis book of knowledge, what is IIBA, and what are the requirements, why the requirements are so critical in an organization, and why certain organizational projects does not lead to completion and they are doomed. So how and what can be done by business analysts to make that work so that the project does not get doomed and it goes towards its completion. So that's all for today. Signing off, Shantanu Chakraborty, Assistant Professor, Department of Data Science. Have a good day.